Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lumen Podcast. Today, I want to welcome a dear friend and mentor. I met this giant at the EO Global Leadership Academy in Washington, D.C., where we graduated in 2015. This is a 3-day leadership submersion experience that is transformative for anyone who undertakes it. It was intended for your presidents and high-tier volunteer leaders. Many end up serving as regional chairs or portfolio directors, and some, as we did, in the global board. We met again in the LAC Regional Council, where he was board liaison for 2 years. One when I was regional chair. His inspiration got me going early in the morning when we traveled because he would wake me up early to go doing some calisthenics. We visited incredible places like Galapagos, Quito, Guayaquil, Panama, and Costa Rica together. We did a tour for Latin America. And it was crucial in my development as an EO leader. I have always been very grateful for some conversations that you led, my friend. After 7 years in venture capital and private equity, he bought his first company in 1994 at the age of 33. Multitest, and it was a producer of automated test equipment for the semiconductor industry. You led 800 employees and grew to 700 employees from 22 million euros in revenue to 140. This is impressive growth, and I would like to share some of this story and insights by my dear friend, Mr. Karl Funke. Welcome, Karl.
Hello, my friend. Hi, Kini. How are you?
Great. Oh, it's so good to have you here, my friend. Thank you very much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
And
Thank you for inviting me.
You've been over here to Guatemala how many times already? 2 or 3?
Yes. 3 at least.
At least 2.
3 or 4. Yeah.
Excellent. So tell me something, Karl. How did you get into the semiconductor automated test equipment business?
That was by pure chance. I knew nothing about the semiconductor industry or the test business. I actually met Multitest when I was a consultant in the venture capital industry, and somebody brought this company up, and we were invited to present. So we were invited to to place a bid on the company. And maybe invest. This was in, I think, 1989 or something like that. And the deal never happened. We moved on, but for years, I stayed in touch with Multitest. And what I really liked about the company was not just the fact that they were a very successful startup. Well, maybe not anymore. At the time when I met them, they were like 9 years old. They'd been a startup at the time. But also that they had a phenomenal company culture and leadership culture. I really loved the vibe of the company. And I remember coming back from my very first appointment with them, and I thought, that's kind of the company I would love to own and run myself at some point. And at that time, it was completely out of the question, right? There was no way I could have ever imagined that I would end up at Multitest.
Nice. And like luck would have it, and the opportunity as well. And you saw the opportunity where you were working, and you decided to make a leap. How was this possible? Did they turn it down?
Well, so I worked for a venture capital company at the time, and I just stayed in touch because, sometimes these deals don't happen overnight, but you build relationships, and at a later point, the opportunity arises. So a few years later, I switched from one venture capital company to another one, and I still remained in touch. And I think it was like 4 years later, they actually phoned me up and said, we think we're actually close to a deal now. We really want somebody like you guys to invest. And if you're interested, why don't you place a bid? So I went back. We went through the whole process for about a year. At the time, I had like six years of venture capital under my belt. I wasn't a junior anymore, so I was the project manager. And for about a year, I prepared the deal. Okay, so 4 years later, by then I'd been in venture capital for 6 years or something like that. And I had changed my employer. So I'd moved from one venture private equity company to another one. And I'd stayed in touch with the company. So they ring me up and they say, Mr. Funke, I think we're close to a deal now. We really want an investor like you guys. And if you're interested, why don't you place a bid? So I went back to visit them and we negotiated. And then for about a year, I was the project manager and I prepared the deal.
So after 6 years, you were not a junior anymore. You already have some seniority. You were putting together the plan.
So having worked on the deal for about a year, I think we were about a week or maybe 10 days away from the closing date. And we were just waiting for a little bit of information from our auditors. And they came back with a minor finding, nothing major. But the investment board actually canceled the deal. And to me, this was probably the best deal I'd seen in my 6 years. So the company, I have to say though, the company was struggling at the time. They had a phenomenal run for the first 10 or 11 years. And then there was a market dip and they had some internal problems as well. So they were not loss making, but they'd lost a significant portion of their profit margins. However, I was pretty confident that they would overcome this and then continue from there. So when my investment board canceled the deal, I thought, oh, this is too bad. I'd really want to buy it myself, but of course I didn't have any money. Then after I'd informed everybody, the sellers, the bankers, the lawyers, the notary, everybody, 2 days later, the banker calls me up and says, Mr. Funke, what's happening? I don't understand this. And he forced me to be open and honest. He made me close the door of my office and he said, Mr. Funke, I don't think you would have made this decision. And I said, wow, I must be loyal here. And he said, come on, you can talk to me just one-on-one. And he said, well, actually, no, I think it's not a good decision. And he said, so you would have bought the company? And I laughed and I said, yeah, sure, but I have zero money. I did, I think. And he said, well, don't worry. I'll give you the money. If you want to buy the company, I'll support you. And I thought, okay, this is too good to be true. This probably doesn't happen again. Yeah. So,
you had a long relationship with this banker? He knew you from a long time?
Yeah, we'd known each other for several years, like 4 or 5 years or something.
Well, cool.
Yeah. But not because I had money with him.
So he also saw it was a good deal, right? And he saw that you could
believe the deal. I suppose he just hoped I could. I don't think he could see that potential in me. I thought I could. In hindsight, I think I was pretty naive, but anyway, it worked.
That's a big leap of faith, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And in fact, it was the second time something like that had happened to me. I had received an offer similar to this one, like 4 years before, maybe. No, 3 years before. And I decided against it because I think there were too many risk factors that I could not calculate. And in hindsight, it was a good idea because the person who made me the offer actually became one of my key investors in this deal.
Wow, when you start joining the dots, huh?
Yeah.
Nice. And you made it, and you bought it.
Yeah, we bought it, and we had, it was perfect timing because just a few months after I bought the company and we restructured it, got some other investors involved, obviously. It wasn't just me and the bank. And I got one of the founders involved as well. And a shortly after we bought it, the market turned around. Well, I mean, literally. 4 months later, I don't think I could have bought it anymore. The window would have been closed.
Wow.
And so that year we had a recovery, and the next year we actually we had a phenomenal run. I had planned for a moderate 5 to 10% growth per year, and the year after we grew by 75%.
Wow. Was this a lucky break from the market? Was it the lucky break plus the culture in the company, innovative product? What do you think that you had such a great growth, or we could just summarize it, there was a great leadership that you brought?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Certainly not that. This is probably more a case of the company grew despite my leadership rather than because of my leadership. But there was definitely a lucky break, a lucky market break, but to some extent also because we resolved the internal situation in the company, not necessarily solving all the problems, but we just took some of the hurdles out. The people, the teams were waiting to be let off the leashes again. They were seriously hampered by management problems and just conflicts in management. And through the change in ownership and just a few minor changes in management, we released all that power and they ran. And the core culture of the company was so strong and so healthy that I don't think anything could ever have killed the company. I mean, the founders built such a phenomenal foundation and leadership and company culture. I don't know what could have killed the company.
That's interesting, right? By 2001, you had grown it to over 700 employees. It must have been really interesting to know what types of processes you had to put in place, processes and culture to be able to grow from 180 to 700. How was leading that scaling up?
That was actually one of the most interesting and most important parts that we built into the company at the time. So we got some experienced managers in, especially a production manager who knew how to efficiently run a big production, which I couldn't do. And the founding partner who remained, he was not the production person. He was a phenomenal engineer. He was a creative person. He was a fantastic salesperson, fantastic relationship builder, but not necessarily somebody for structures. And because I had no idea, I mean, I was a rookie. I had literally no insights, but I had a good sense for leadership culture and leadership gaps. And I focused on building a very strong leadership development process, leadership teams, and supported the production manager and introducing reliable, repeatable processes. And with that, the market took off, and we just ran with the market, and we were able to catch up. So the semiconductor industry is characterized by big swings up, big swings down. And usually we would have a phenomenal run growing the company by 100% per year, maybe for 18 months, maybe for 2 years. And then we would suffer a dip where we might go back by 30 or sometimes even 50%. And most of our competitors would contract. They would lay off people. They would just cut costs tremendously. And we used the good times to build reserves and the bad times to train our people. We never laid off people. We just reduced work times. Maybe we never laid anybody off. We just trained them to become better because when we didn't have delivery pressure, we could just work on our processes and on our qualifications. And with that, we grew from, I believe we were initially maybe number 10 in the market or so worldwide. And in the end, we were busy in 4 business segments, and in 2 or 3 of them, we were number 1 or number 2.
Wow.
And in one of them, we were number 5. So, yeah.
This is so high tech. I mean, not many competitors probably. Were these businesses something that you were constantly looking for? Were there partnerships, being business to business with companies who needed this service? How was it commercially?
So our competition was mainly in Asia. At the time, it was mostly Japanese companies, and in the US. In the US, there were 3 or 4. In Asia and in Japan, there were maybe also 3 or 4, and then very few spread around in Asia. Later on, there were many more strong competitors from mainland China and from Taiwan. But I think we excelled in our service, for sure. We had local service in about 20 countries around the world. And we just had specific solutions to their problems, and we tried to remain very close to our customers.
Very nice. How many countries were you in? 20 countries? Or did you operate it?
I think we were busy in about 20 countries. So we had at one point we had production facilities and engineering facilities in 4 countries. Sorry. Main headquarter was Germany. Then we had a facility in the US. We had one in Singapore and 5 even: Singapore, Malaysia, and India.
Oh, wow.
But the engineering and production in Singapore we closed, and we just had another engineering facility in Bangalore in India, and production also in Malaysia. And apart from that, we had service teams in many countries. So essentially, we operated in about 20 countries. Yeah.
Wow. So you grew to the business to over 1,000 employees and over $250 million sales in revenue. And then it came time to exit. How was the experience of exiting something that you had done for over, 15 years?
Yeah. So we actually did personally, I exited in 2 steps. The first step was in 2001 when we took on a big strategic investor who bought majority shares and then bought out all the old investors. And I had intended to stay on for maybe another 5 years or so maximum. But in 2001, after 9/11, we almost went bankrupt because 9/11 was like COVID. We lost 90% of our business overnight, like 9-0. We went from 20 million a month to 2 million a month. And I don't think, you never know, but it would have been very difficult to survive without investor. And then we turned the company around though, and restructured it again in a way that was as fascinating as the growth in the first 7 years. And then finally I left at the end of 2009, after 15 and a half years or something.
What was fascinating of that restructure?
We had to fight for survival, and we needed to make some dramatic shifts. At the time, we were over 700 people, and we had to, after 9/11, we had to cut the workforce in half. And I think in 1 year, we made as many losses as we had profits in the 3 years before, or something like that. Wow. And this was the very first time in our history that we had losses. And then we just completely trimmed the company on efficiency and profitability. And within 2 years, I think we cut our delivery times from 6 months to 6 weeks. We cut we sped up our inventory turnover from 1.8 to over 10 per year. We freed 2/3 of our cash that was tied in working capital, and we built a structure that enabled the company to breathe. So we still suffered those swings, right? But we were able to adapt to those swings by just contracting if the market shrunk by 50%, and we could expand within a matter of 6 to 8 weeks by the factor of 3 if we needed to do that as well.
Nice.
Just building that structure was fascinating, and we just had some very good experience help in doing that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So it's amazing what one does when stressed, huh? These types of crises. I love that saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. I think it is from Winston Churchill. And it talks about that.
Yeah. And that was definitely true in this case.
Another one of him that applies is if you're going through hell, keep going. 90%, right?
We did.
I mean, wow. COVID was like nothing for you. You had already gone through some of that.
Yeah.
Nice. Can you share a little bit about where you're originally from?
So I grew up in a very basic environment. My dad initially had a small business making, those Dutch wooden clocks.
Of course.
Yeah.
The cuckoo bird.
That my
Clocks. Is it like those?
I don't know. I don't even know how you call them in English.
The mechanical.
Yeah. So that this was in the 60s, but that was a dying business. And so, I mean, where I grew up, it was in the middle of the countryside. The next village was 4 kilometers away. So I had to cycle to school 4 kilometers most of the time. Later on, there were school buses, but not when I grew up initially. I wouldn't say we were poor, but we weren't well off by any means. And my parents had to work hard and struggle, put a lot of effort into getting us through school, and even allowed us to go to university later on. And from an early life, I knew that I wanted to get out of that. I knew there was more in the world. I always dreamt of traveling the world and seeing the world. And when I was small, my solution for that was becoming a pilot. So I always wanted to become an airline pilot. By the time I thought it was cool. The money was good as far as I could tell. They looked cool with their uniforms. They traveled the world. And at the time, to me, flying around with a couple of hundred people and lots of beautiful stewardesses behind.
Oh, it sounds like a plan. Where's the sign?
Sounded like a good idea.
Visionary. So you wanted to travel the world. You've been to how many countries?
By now, I've been around 70 or so. I've lost count. I think my wife and I, if we count the countries we've been to together, it's about 75 or 80. So she's visited a few, I have not, and the other way around. But about that.
So it's interesting that the experience you had growing up. What was your childhood like?
Quite family oriented, and my parents paid a lot of attention for us going through school and being good at school, because to them that was the solution of leading a better life. So this was kind of the beliefs that were introduced to us. And I was a pretty good student at school, but I had no idea what to do with my life when I was 18. So when I was 15, my mom died, and I was the oldest of four siblings. So my youngest brother was, I think, 10 or maybe not even 10 at the time. And that was rough. Obviously, being the oldest, I had to take on special responsibility, probably leadership also in the family. So this was the first event that introduced me to being a leader. Well, and I think it had a significant impact on how I led my life and what I needed to do. It also gave me a sense of responsibility on the one hand. On the other hand, the feeling that I could design or determine what I do in life if I take that leadership role.
So it's a tremendous impact and experience, and having it so early in life. I mean, it must have gone through many existential thinking, and what is it all about? A great thing that you took it and made a passion out of leadership. That's when you started wanting to know more about leadership. Did you start reading on it?
I suppose that event just threw me into leadership. This was obviously not planned, and just the circumstances of everything that happened at the time. I had the feeling that I was called upon to take a leadership role. I think it was too much for my dad. He was really struggling, and I just sensed that I was needed as a leader in that situation. At the same time, I had also, when I was 15, I don't know if it was before or after, I had an experience in my very first summer job when I spent 3 weeks in a nearby company to earn enough money to buy myself, I don't know if I wanted a bike or a stereo, something, I don't know. My dad said, look, if you want it, you have to earn the money, you have to get a job and earn it, because I cannot give it to you. And what I experienced in that job made me commit to two things. First of all, I will never, ever just work for money in my life, because I had 3 horrendous weeks. And the second one was I observed a company culture and a leadership culture that really put me off. I observed how people were motivated, how they were treated badly, and how they were just suffering. And I kind of committed that at some point in life, I would lead an organization and do it in a way that would motivate and inspire people rather than make them suffer. I thought I want to run a company where people thrive, not suffer.
That's a great experience. Going through that.
And that stuck with me.
Yeah. Making it a cool place, have a cool culture, help people find purpose in what they do. So
luckily, later in life, I found multitest, and I didn't realize, because I didn't see the company, and I remembered what I did, what I thought of when I was 15. Of course, 15, 16, whatever, you don't remember that. But looking back much later, I could connect the dots, and that was an interesting experience here.
That's great. What is something that you could tell your 18-year-old self now, something that you would like your grandsons to grow knowing?
I don't know what I'm going to tell my grandsons, because I don't know how they will turn out when they're 18. But if I could speak to myself, I would probably tell myself, just trust that things will work out in life. Do not try to push too hard. sometimes things are not meant to be, and then leave it. But if they're meant to be, then you notice and you can run. And this is an experience I can, again, looking back, I've had many times. Very often, the things that were meant to happen were really easy. And when I tried to force things, I paid for it, either with money or with real pain or with relationship drama. So
That's a great takeaway.
Life is not supposed to be hard. I don't think. It is hard sometimes. It is hard sometimes, but I think if I'd listened to my intuition more often and understood it, it could have been easier. Yeah.
That's a great learning. So you wanted to be a pilot. I remember you shared that you had flown or what was it, helicopter?
Yeah, I always dreamt of flying, and I had an experience once when we were on holiday in Hawaii, and we opted for a helicopter flight rather than just a sightseeing flight. And the pilot took the doors off, so we had this flight with no doors on the helicopter. I thought this was so cool. And when I came back, my business partner said, "So why didn't you try fly?" I thought, I didn't even know you could just do that. So the next time I flew to the US, I just went to the next flight school and said, "Can I try?" And then I trained for a couple of years. Yeah.
Wow. You had a traumatic experience in a helicopter as well. Can you share some of that?
Yeah. I actually crashed with a helicopter, and I mean, kind of. We did an emergency landing, which was, not like you crash straight into the ground, but we had a structural failure.
I was going to say, like taking the clutch outside of the car when it's a hard landing, I guess.
Yeah, kind of. So we had a structural failure in about 4,500 feet when we flew through turbulence, and one of our support struts broke. And then in the course of that, we lost the door, we lost the tail rotor, we lost half the cabin. Fortunately, I wasn't on my own. I was close to my first solo flight, but fortunately not yet. So the instructor next to me took over. I was piloting, he took over, and we landed. We did an emergency landing where the helicopter kind of it sank close to the ground, but it wasn't crashed like you would see in a proper crash. We got out, although it was a pretty scary experience. And I did not know whether we would manage or not. So for about, I don't know, if you think it lasts forever, it was probably only a few minutes by the time we got down. I wasn't sure whether our hot engine would set this was over dry land with very high dry grass, whether we would set the field alight or whether we would find a spot even where we could land, because there was lots of fares on. But we were lucky.
Well, for sure. Did you get hurt from that accident?
No, none of us did. And the comment, so they picked me up, the chief instructor picked me up, and the first question he asked was, so you intend to continue flying? I said, I guess so. He said, okay, then you fly us home now. So they put me
back on the horse.
Right away. And then the next thing he said, very few people survive a helicopter crash, but very few people have more than one. So I guess you're good now.
So statistics was in your favor.
Yeah.
Wow. I cannot recall. Was there another incident, snowboarding or something like skiing?
How many do you want to hear about? Which time do we have?
You're an adventurous guy.
Yeah. Well, I've tested the limits a few times. Well, I did crash into the back of a truck once. Middle of the night, and I guess I just fell asleep for a second and crashed into the back of a truck. And fortunately, in a way that did not hurt me too badly. And fortunately, there was nobody else in the car. So other than a broken arm and a few cuts and a wrecked car, wasn't much damage.
I find that, in my experience, I've gone through some experiences like that. And you have some similar to what fast failure is, like a fast failure. And it puts you in a different place from where before you went into that or that happened. Was this a case for you? Did you have any takeaways after those experiences?
So the area in Germany where I come from, they say that people are pretty stubborn and they don't learn their lessons early. And maybe this is the reason why I had to have many of these incidences. Depending on what you count, I come up to 5 or 6. And yes, every time something like this happens, you reflect. Sometimes you have lots of time to reflect because you're in hospital and there's not much else to do. You feel lucky, and you think, okay, is this a signal? Should I change something in my life? But in many of those cases, that feeling lasted for a couple of months, maybe even 6 months. And then I was back into my old routine. I was back into my old bad habits as well. But there was one incident in 2008 where I landed in an emergency in the emergency room in Tokyo Hospital, and but not being able to breathe anymore. And in hindsight, I wasn't quite clear what they diagnosed, but I later on learned it was a lung embolism.
Oh, wow.
And I learned that my mom had died from a lung embolism. So there was probably some history there. And that was very close. And that actually woke me up. That was the event that made me rethink the way I lived my life and the way I run my business. Also the situation in my business at the time. And that's when I decided I needed to leave multitask. I need to get out of that. I was pretty much burnt out.
I remember you said that you had a 4-month window opportunity probably when you came into that business, but also you mentioned at some point in one of our conversations that the window for leaving was also like right in that moment. If you would have waited longer, it wouldn't have been able to happen. Can you share some of that?
I can't remember us talking about this, but I suppose so. I suppose you can always leave. The question is, how do you leave? And I can just stop things immediately, or I try to hand it over orderly. I was pretty rattled at the time, and I realized that the situation in the company now with the new investor, I told you earlier that we had a new investor, big investor in there. Something that had started out brilliantly had turned a little sour. And I think that emotional stress really got to me. That's why I ended up there. And unfortunately, I could not turn that around. There was no way that I could have made them leave and leave us the company. So I didn't have many alternatives to finding my way out of the company and starting a new life.
Good. So what is something that you're proud of?
In any specific
in
direction?
Like, how something that you're proud of, something that you did, or something that you fixed, or something that you created, or something that you changed in your lifetime, something.
So I think the I mean, obviously, I've been successful in business, and that's something I could be proud of. But that's not the one thing that comes to mind first of all. What I'm proud of is usually people I've helped or relationships I've built. So I remember the very first promotion I had to do in my business. And I'd been in there for a few months. I'd never run a business. I'd never led any people. And this became one of the most successful managers in my company, one of the best success stories, because I trusted him, and because we built a relationship where I was able to develop this person. And there were a few more like that. Obviously, saving the company from near bankruptcy and building a really successful and big fun company was great. But in my private life, especially, I think what I'm really proud of is repairing some personal relationships in my family, especially with my daughter, who suffered from me being too busy as an entrepreneur and a businessman, and having managed to come back together and close up and have a really close relationship now also with my grandsons and also with the rest of my family. That's definitely something I'm proud of. Yeah.
It's interesting connecting the dots to what you said earlier about you were rattled in the business and that you wanted out. I guess sometimes entrepreneurs have this failure from success, and you have failure in the business, and then I guess you're in a different position and you might be gone away from home, might be gone away from the family. So that's something that we have to cope for as well. And it's great that you find that, it's something that you were able to repair and that you have a great family relationship. You mentioned that you were winding down a little from the venture business and from your entrepreneurial activities. After selling the business, you opened a new tourism business, and then you started with the venture fund and started helping out and mentoring different companies. How is that now, or how has that experience of winding down been?
Actually, that's been more of a difficult phase. So if I look back, my very first business venture, my very first entrepreneurial exploration turned out to be very successful, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing. There are many people who try a few things first and they have failures first, and then they have big success. That, in a way, I think that's the better way to go, even if it's not fun to fail first. But if you have a big success to start with, it's very easy to become overconfident, and it's you forget what it's like to start struggling. So the things I started afterwards, there were a few failures, there were a few successes, and there were a few failures, none of the big successes. So, and when I look back now, I think none of the things I tried were really according to my true passion. In multitest, I was living my true passion. I was living my purpose in life, and it just couldn't fail. And I tried many things. I tried to go back into investment just to find out there was a good reason why I left investment at the time.
You wanted to confirm that.
I should have. I should have remembered that. And I was asked to help people in company boards and with my experience, and all of that was a great experience. But it wasn't really aligned with my true passion and my true talents either. More recently, I've become involved more strongly in leadership again. So leadership training, leadership, designing leadership workshops, facilitating as well. And whereas I never really liked public speaking, it's become more comfortable for me now, and I really enjoy the leadership training. In fact, we're designing a leadership workshop academy type thing right now. Friend of mine and myself, and I can tell that this is a passion that I can live for, because it serves the purpose of helping people to elevate their game, to break through the ceiling that they find hard to break through on their own. That's it. I'm fascinated by seeing people grow around me. Just when they break open and they suddenly realize their potential, and then they start living their potential. And if I can help them do that, if I can help shine a light there, open a door, or even give a hand to step up to the next level, that's what excites me.
And I can give testament to that. When I was regional chair of Latin America for the Entrepreneurs Organization, where we both participate, I remember at one point thinking the usual, I didn't sign up for this mindset, coming to you and saying, "Oh, I didn't sign up for this and that." This being a volunteer position, and I love your answer. You said this is a great growth opportunity, and I thought I knew you were going to say something like that. That was great.
Yeah.
It made me rethink. And you shared at that time that you had been doing the 1-10-10-10, sometimes referred to as the miracle morning routine, where you do 1 minute for purpose, why am I alive today, 10-minute positive reading, 10-minute meditating, and 10-minute journaling. And you said, I've done like 1,500 days journaling since 2015. And I was like, wow, how do you know? And from then, I shared with you that I started putting the number every day I journal. And to this day, that was 2 years ago. To this day, that journal today was 542nd time. So that was
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, my friend. And it's something really cool that you were definitely an inspiration. Tell me a little bit about your leadership path, or your path of leadership, as they say in EO. Now that we have some more minutes still. How it went from, being a stronghold in Europe, growing Germany to be the biggest chapter, one of the biggest chapters in the world, being a facilitator, the experience of being in the board, and now with the School of Presidents, how has that been?
Again, most of the decisions and most of the steps, I did not plan. I didn't volunteer even. I was shoved into. So I was president of EO Germany at the time. There was just one chapter in all of Germany in 2007 to 2009. And I was asked to join the board a year before that because we were planning for the EO Berlin University, and they needed somebody to find some sponsoring partners. So I was good enough for that. And then one night while I was in Canada, I'd forgotten to switch my phone off, and they rang me at 4 a.m. and told me that I was going to be the next president. And I just said yes, half asleep. And the next morning I thought, oh, that was a weird dream. And then I saw there was a call. So I was president then, and I didn't really fancy to continue my path of leadership then. It didn't attract me. So I was, after 3 years of president, I was out. And somebody from the US convinced me to join the MyEO task force, I think 2014 or 15. And there was somebody else convinced me to also join the leadership committee at the time. And I became a strategy summit facilitator then, and I became EO Munich president for the second time. So at one point, I had actually four hats on in Munich or in leadership at the same time, and I really, really enjoyed it because the people you meet, they are so committed and they are so warm and open, and it's just a phenomenal community. I couldn't get enough of it. So I guess if I'd had the capacity, I would have put 2 more hats on even. But fortunately, they did not let me. And through that, I was asked to join the global board. And again, this was 3.5 phenomenal years. Fantastic learning, especially. I think I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about EO. I learned a lot about group dynamics and the dynamics of the big, very organic organization. I would say I matured in a certain way that I probably would not have without that experience.
I love it. You went also through IMD, through high performance boards program.
Yeah, we did that. I think we were the first class in the board who did that.
Well, what was your takeaway from it?
My takeaway was that they have a lot to offer, and I think they had some very, very good advice and suggestions for us. But at the same time, EO is a very different beast. They deal a lot with corporate boards and big organizations that are structured in certain ways. EO is very different because it's got the dual leadership structure and it's got the dual leadership cultures as well. And at the same time, there is a high frequency of transition in the membership leadership side. And getting all that to build an orchestra that plays beautiful symphonies all the time, extremely challenging. And I don't think anybody from outside really understands it. This is something that you do not easily understand unless you've been part of it.
I guess the dual leadership being staff on one side and members on other, and also the members being the clients of the organization. So it's really interesting. I agree with you. It's such a unique organization. There is a video actually of you that we showed to the onboarding directors to the board. And I think you recorded it in Lima, in Peru. And there you're talking about the mindset needed for this new leadership position. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yes, I think if I recall correctly, now this is a few years ago, but if I recall correctly, I highlight the importance of curiosity, right?
Yeah.
So this is, I don't know when I came up with this, but once you get to my age, you have a lot of opportunities to reflect on, and hopefully a few more opportunities to have the time to reflect as well. And when I did that, I thought, okay, what are the characteristics, or what would be advice I would give somebody else that has either helped me when I used it, or been a burden when I didn't. And at the forefront is definitely curiosity. So when people ask me about the board or any leadership role in EO, what should they do? What's the best way to go? I tend to tell them there's absolutely no guarantee that you'll enjoy it or you'll be successful or that any of your ideas will be implemented. However, if you go in with humility and curiosity, if you go in with the mindset that you assume you know nothing, and you're maximum curious to understand why things are the way they are, how they got there, how it's developed, and understand maybe yourself as well. Why do you react to this the way you do? Why do you see things the way you do, and why does somebody else see it completely differently? Not assuming that my idea is the best or the only one, but just one of potentially a few ideas. If you go in with that mindset, you're almost guaranteed to enjoy, because you're just learning and growing tremendously. But if you attach too much to your own ideas and to your own way, it can become quite frustrating.
It kind of like resonates with ego in a sense, right? If you have a Shoshin mentality and you go with a beginner's mindset and you're trying to go and see how you can add value, how can you make the most of being in that position for the greater good of the organization and the members, versus trying to go in and doing what I think is best, trying to, I guess, orchestrate or organize, like one would normally have in an executive position, right? I think it has to do a lot of with the mindset of being in a board. Would you agree this is also in your board experience? Has it been different in other boards?
I think there is a big difference in an EO board, between an EO board and the corporate board. I've been on 4 or 5 other boards. And the two differences I would want to highlight is, one, that EO is such a complicated organization that I had the feeling that only about 3 years into the role, so with 6 months left, that I had understood enough to be more confident about pushing in a certain direction. And this is shortly before you're kicked out of the board, right?
Yeah.
And then due to the transitional nature of our leadership, we don't realize, and this is kind of connected to my first point, we do not realize that very often what we see has not been in existence for very long. So when you join a board like the EO board or any company board, you spend a little bit of time to understand how things work, and you're not there every day. So you meet maybe once a quarter, sometimes once a month, but that's almost, that's very frequent if that were the case. So you get data points every now and then. So it takes a while to understand the processes, the constellations and so on. And then after a while, you've understood that. Now, in EO, in addition to that, you should also understand how the development has been. We assume, once we have understood this, we assume that the process or a rule or certain behaviors have been in place for a long time. In EO, sometimes they've only been in place for 6 months. Which means they have not really been tested, right? If something has been in place for a few years, usually it's been tested, it's been reiterated, and it's been kind of, it's evolved to become stable. In EO, that's not necessarily the case. And we don't understand that because we don't see it. We just assume it's different because that's what we're used to from our other environment. And that makes life even more difficult in EO. And that's why always staying curious and questioning whether you've really understood and is essential, even more essential in EO than in other organizations.
So there is this, I know that you're a learner, that you love learning and growing and, being open to new things. You share that something that you were passionate about learning nowadays was history, philosophy. Could you share an example of what in both of those, or if they're related, or if it's history, what type of history, what years, or where geographically?
It's not particular years or particular geographies. It's I believe that the whole world evolves and has always evolved. And and if you know Ray Dalio, I'm a fan of Ray Dalio's as well, and what he so aptly describes as how our lifetime is too short to live through even one longer cycle, which is why very often we find it difficult to learn from history. However, and I have to say, when in school, I hated history. I really didn't know what to do with it. But today, I find it fascinating that when we go back in time, when we go back to the Middle Ages or to the ancient Egyptians or even further, that we find indications, or I know you're a big fan of Stoicism, and some of the wisdom we find in those years, that's the same stuff we preach today, or we try to learn today. When I work with young entrepreneurs, very often they have solutions and ideas to problems that I find, I know, we talked about that 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Now, a different context. We didn't have digital tools then, but essentially the underlying problems were exactly the same, maybe at a different magnitude, maybe in a different context, but the patterns are exactly the same, which I find fascinating. And I believe if we could learn a lot more from history, just trying to abstract a little bit, individually, as society, or as humankind, we could be so much further. We think we are innovative and ingenious by finding great new solutions. Very often, it's a solution that's been around for a long time, just repackaged in a different way. Even and yeah, that's.
I love that reference.
You know, they say.
Yeah.
You know, they say it's great when you can learn from your own mistakes. It's brilliant when you can learn from the mistakes of other people.
Oh yeah, I love that.
And I think very often we miss that opportunity, and I've definitely missed it many times, far too many times.
I think one takeaway from Sapiens was that by the time the nomads said, you know, let's just stay here and become an agriculture society, they couldn't go back and say, no, this is a bad idea. It'll be better if we just keep moving, right? We're gonna become sedentary and fat and lazy or whatever. So it's interesting. I mean, generations don't have that ability. Imagine living for hundreds of years. I know that you're in a...
There's one other thing.
Yeah.
I'm an engineer by training, and then I did my business degree. And in doing business, I was always much more interested in microeconomics and macroeconomics. I was always interested in the bits that I thought I could directly influence. And what I didn't realize is that it's much more important to understand the big flows. So if I look at my successes and my failures, in a way, I think I can pride myself of the successes and what I did to get there. However, if I'm honest and if I'm realistic, it was much more important to be at the right spot at the right time, to be part of the right flow. And if you think of life as being in a boat on a river, the river determines where you go. You can do what you want in your boat. If you're trying to struggle against the flow of the river, it's going to be hard. If you go with the river and you navigate it nicely, it's much smarter. And for that reason, I'm more focused now to understand the big flows, the big tendencies in the world, and kind of be in the right spot at the right time.
I love that. I love that example about the river and the boat. Can you share some of those tendencies? Is there something that you have gained knowledge of now or awareness of?
So, we see a lot of, I don't know if I should say it, there's a lot of polarization. I don't know if I want to call it chaos, but it feels right now like the world is drifting apart more.
Yeah.
Which is concerning to a lot of people, also to me. At the same time, however, I also have the feeling that many more people are becoming more aware as well. So there's an opposite trend with more people becoming seemingly becoming more responsible, becoming less materialistic, more concerned about the big picture, especially with the young generation. And I'm not able to say which trend is stronger or more promising. It really depends also whether you look at the mainstream media that tells one story, and if you go and research certain trends, such as, I think the word is turning more spiritual these days. There's a lot more knowledge in neuroscience, biomedicine. I find this fascinating, what's happening there, the explosion of knowledge in all kinds of different disciplines fascinates me. I think I could just be a full-time student 24 hours a day.
For sure.
I don't know what to do with all that knowledge.
So teaching and a student, both at the same time, I love it. Paul Botte, chairman of Nestle, he was an IMD, and he spoke about the relevance of governance. And something that he said resonates with what you're saying about one of the big challenges in leadership is the amount of uncertainty that exists right now. And that has to do a little bit with the polarization that you were talking about just now.
Yeah.
So I know that you're an adventurous guy, and I understand now why you love cycling so much, because you went to school every day on a bicycle. So that's where you got those strong legs from. What has been one of your favorite adventures that you've done?
Oh, most recently, definitely the bike ride my wife and I did from Munich to Rome last year. So we packed our bikes. It's called bike packing these days. I think it's been a trend for maybe 4 or 5 years now. It took us 12 days to cycle to Rome. That I've hiked to Everest Base Camp.
Nice.
Which I really loved as well.
You climbed Macatenango also in Guatemala. I slept there.
Yeah, and slept there and got chased off the mountain. Got evacuated because the volcano had set the forest alight in the night.
Fire volcano, huh? Nice. How many kilometers was it from Munich to Rome?
1,200. So we did 1,200 kilometers and 12,000 meters altitude gain in 12 days.
Wow.
This was not planned. It just came out like that.
That's amazing. So it's like 100 kilometers a day that you were doing it. Wow, that's a lot. I mean, Angie is truly an angel to be doing those great adventures with you. I'm coping, huh?
No, Nomen is Omen, right?
That's great. So you have a great relationship with Latin America. You were probably Latino in a past life. Some of us call you Carlitos now. What is that great relationship with Latin America? You're now a new member also of the LAC Bridge chapter. And you like the culture. Tell me, when did it start?
I think it definitely started. Well, actually, I was going to say when I was assigned the relationship, the liaisonship when I was on the global board, but I think it started earlier. My daughter went to Argentina for a year when she was 15 as an exchange. So this was in the year 2000, 2001. And a year after she came back, we went down to visit her host family. And we spent 2 or 3 weeks traveling in Argentina. And I fell in love with Latin America. I thought this was the culture, the warmth was so phenomenal. And then I came to Brazil a few times. I don't know. I think I only went to Central America once in 2018 to Costa Rica. I also liked that. And then obviously once we were liaised, you took me around, and it feels like part of my family, maybe from a former life. I don't know.
I love it. You have your home in Guatemala. And I know that as a grower, always learning, you've become a fan of a new instrument as well, the handpan.
Oh, no. Yeah.
How long have you
I'm
been
afraid
practicing
I'm not very. No, I'm afraid I'm not such a diligent student at the moment. But anyway, yeah.
What is it about the handpan? Is it like a didgeridoo, vibrationally? I understand it's gotten a little involved, or maybe not involved, but more people are doing it. How did you come into it?
So I've never played an instrument. I've never got. I never got close to music really, but I always thought it would be nice to be able to play an instrument. And a few years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, during a visit in Madrid, I suddenly heard the sound in Retiro Park. Retiro Park is a very famous park in Madrid, and it fascinated me. So we went searching, and there was this guy sitting on the ground playing this instrument that looked like a steel drum. And we listened to him, and then when he was done, we talked to him, and I was fascinated that a few weeks later I bought my first steel drum, and I've been playing on and off. There were phases when I played a lot. More recently, I've neglected it a bit, but it's the sound, it's the rhythm, it's the vibe.
The other day I heard that birds, when they sing in the morning, they bring out this vibration, and supposedly, thousands of years ago or millions or whatever, birds would be singing when there were no predators. So one would feel good from hearing that, and supposedly in the morning when birds sing, plants open up and whatnot, and the whole earth awakes. I'm curious if that vibration has something to do with that instrument.
Maybe. I mean, if you go to YouTube, you actually get a lot of videos there, or just audio channels that use the handpan as well, or it's played a lot in for meditative purposes. Or with breath work, it's as a background sound. It's become quite popular, yes.
Nice. So are you going to show us your handpan and maybe hit a couple notes so we can understand how advanced you are in your curriculum?
Well, do I get to approve what I play before you put this out in the video?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try. All right.
All right.
Let's see if it works still. Just a minute. So,
wow.
Can you see it? This is what it looks like.
Like an ovni.
So this is a
flying saucer.
Yeah. It's like a flying saucer. So if you know that I'm also interested in UFOs, maybe this is why it landed with me.
I didn't know that.
And these are the different tones here. Okay, so you see these patches, each one of them has a different note. So let me see if I can elicit some music or some sound. Good like this? I suppose you can see it, right? Hang on. Okay.
Wow, man.
That was a bit fast. Usually you wouldn't play this as fast. You would play it more.
Nice. That's awesome. I'm gonna get a flying saucer like that. Thank you for that,
I
my
need
friend.
to.
I appreciate that. That was pretty cool. So
I hope you could
I
get
could
the
hear
sound.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would like our audience to know? Something that you want to share to those that are aspiring to be an entrepreneur or are struggling entrepreneurs or that look up to others who have successfully exited or are winding down? Some big takeaway that you could share.
Oh God, big takeaway. This is such a mighty word. um, I think the what I'm trying to become better at is really enjoying life every day and to the fullest. I've just had a reminder today where somebody said, just enjoy a bit more, just relax and enjoy a bit more. And I thought, so Angie and I went to London this weekend, and for the first time, I didn't take anything except my phone, like no iPad, nothing, and no book, absolutely nothing. I said, look, let's just have 4 days completely to ourselves, and let's just drift and not plan anything. And it was except for one concert, and it was phenomenal. And I thought, I should do this more often. They say at the end of the life, the only thing you regret is not having lived more fully. So
Live fully. I like that.
Trying. I'm trying to be better at that. Yeah.
Now that we're finishing we already have an hour and a half, and I love it. Thank you for that. I know that you have a plan after this. We spoke yesterday about books. Not what your favorite book is, but what is a book that gave you a good message that you can recommend, that you can look back to and say, that book had a good message for me. Maybe it was serendipitous, and you read what you needed to read when you took it. But it can be just a great book also that you can share with us.
So book recommendations always, for me, always depend on what I'm working on right now. So so as I said earlier, we're in the midst of designing some leadership retreat stuff, and I'm working with the EO teams a lot. And I find a lot of the success and the outcome of these events depends on the design and the flow of the event. And very often we probably don't pay enough attention on any of our meetings or gatherings. And a book that has impacted me that way is The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. So I was fortunate enough to see her live last year during a training, and then also read her book, and the wisdom she shares in that book, and it's like a blueprint for so much that happens in our social life, and how we could really improve that experience so immensely if we paid a little bit more attention to it, if we put more intention into how we do this. So that's one book that I absolutely find very, very valuable. But I mean, we could go through my library and I could probably pick out 20 or
100 for sure.
40.
No, I love that book. I'm gonna get it. It sounds really good. And I don't want to close it before asking you a quote that has accompanied you throughout life that resonates with you.
Yeah, again, so I love books. I love quotes. I've got a library of books, and I've got a very long library of quotes as well. Usually when I give a talk or when I give a seminar or teach something, I look for quotes that fit. Very often I don't find them anymore. But one that sticks out and that has accompanied me for a long, long time and I do not know the author of this quote as if you want to discover new oceans, you need to have the courage to lose sight of the shore. And I remember this quote was given to me by somebody early on in my life when I was struggling with the need to explore on the one hand, and also letting go of what I had. This is a struggle I've fought with all my life, and I suppose that's why this quote is so important to me, because it reminds me of what I need to be aware of.
Nice. I love that quote. Thank you for sharing it, my friend. And last but not least, if there was someone who is not alive anymore, or you might have not known, could have been, a singer, a prophet, whoever, and you could have an hour to talk with, who would that be?
Queen Elizabeth.
Nice. Yeah, she's been through a lot.
Yeah,
she's met a lot.
If I could, if I could have an hour with her and have a very open conversation, both of us knowing none of it would ever leave the room, I think that would be phenomenal.
I love it. Well, any last message, my dear friend? I'm really appreciative of your time, and I love this conversation we've had. Anything you want to sign up with?
Well, thank you for your friendship and for making me part of the Latin America family. This has been extremely valuable. Angie and I were recently we were thinking, okay, where are our friends? And my circle of friends is spread around the world. I've got many more friends around the world than I have here in Munich. And by far the biggest portion of those friends sits in Latin America. So
I know that.
It's definitely my second home, even though I don't own a home there, but it feels like home every time I come.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Well, thank you very much, my friend. We had a lot of value from hearing your story and your experience. And I know that we can do many more, and I'm sure we will, hopefully, in the near future, in a specific theme or whatever we want to discuss. But I appreciate you a lot. I send you a big hug, and thank you for your friendship as well.
Thank you, my friend. Say hi to everybody, especially to Karl.
You too. To Angie, please. Goodbye.
Speak soon.